Hello, Demonari here, back to covering code. This is a software of an HTTP web server. So if I open localhost in the port of the server, that is this, you can see that it loads, gives an error message because some files are missing or some of my responses are weird because I don't know. But it can handle sending images, it can handle sending HTTP requests, it can handle post request, page source. I see that this is a post type form, so there's that. And if I go over the requests and everything that happens, this entire mess is the image. So here is the header of the image and the content of it, but that's image JPEG. The server is extremely simplistic in the type of message that it gives. It takes simply type of HTTP. It uses HTTP 1.1 response code and what this code means. So 200 OK of HTTP 1.1, content type is image JPEG, size of the file is 88,802. Need to silence my phone because this is weird again. Okay. And this was the request. Okay, let's go to the start. The client sends a request, the request ends weirdly, and then the client finishes the request. After the client finishes the request, the server assembles the request, and then you can see it's a get root HTTP 1.1 host localhost connection keep alive, all of those things that I don't really care about. Ah, shit. Yeah, I know that there is. Can I finish actually reading the entire thing? And then it gives a response. The response is HTTP 1.1, which is HTTP type, the version of the HTTP, 200, which is the code, and OK. Content type, text HTML, content length, the size of the file, then doc type HTML, all of this, and that file is in the web server, in the HTTP server folder under www, and it's here. Open with Notepad. Here it is, exactly as is. It is sent to the client, and then there is a style CSS because now web browser always look for style CSS, and where is it? I don't know. It looks for style CSS and favcon ICO. I think something like this, or favicon, like it looks for an icon to put here, and for the style CSS, the default style of the website, And of course that when it try and get the style, you can see there is no style, so it gets a response HTTP 1.1.404 not found. Of course that it sees that it needs an image because there was an image file in the source. Page source here, image src freemim.jpg. So it sends a request get freemim.jpg. Once again for localhost blah blah blah. Construct the request. This is what it gets, the raw data that it gets, and this is after the request has been compiled into a single thing, because sometimes the request is too big, so it separates into 2 or 3 different patches, and then after it gets the see that it needs to send an image, it says HTTP 200 OK because it found the image, content type image / JPEG because that's the content type that of the file type, and then content length, the size of the image, and then it sends all of this bullshit, which is huge. Here it is, favicon.ico. If you want your site to have an image here, you make a favicon.ico, and the tab itself would have an icon. But of course it doesn't exist, so yeah. There was a bad request for some reason. But I'm not sure what. Bad request, missing file, request type. Oh, because request type was empty. So it sent some kind of message that was, it's trying to send something that was an empty message, and the server is looking at like a message that it gets, and it's like the message is completely empty. What the heck am I supposed to do with it? And the path would be the default path always if there is no path. If the path is empty, it's just going to be here. Subdata is also empty, and it's extremely easy to read because it's just this. If I go to a missing file, like this, I request okay, here it is. If I make a post request, like here, you should see the post request, and every time it sends this weird error message. And here, post root HTTP, this, and then you can see that in the body of the request you can find the data. All of this would be very important later, because there is no default way to handle post messages for HTML files. There is no default message for web servers that are not HTTP, not HTTP. So PHP, ASP, all of those handle this data. Those servers handle them on the server side. But to be able to use ASP or PHP or whatever other like advanced language, you need to be able to compile the code in real time. So you need to build a compiler for ASP or PHP in your own code, or you can take one that is already working. Never mind. So how does this server actually work? The server has a few entries. Max clients is 10 for this server, and every client has its own socket and has its ID or something. When a client is accepted, it opens a thread that processes the client. Whenever a client does something, it resets the temporary message, memset 0 all over the bufferland, and iResult receive this. iResult is just receiving how many bytes of data I got, and if the bytes of data that I received are more than the default bufferland, meaning like bigger than the buffer itself, then temp message would overflow. So instead of it overflowing, I have a way to handle those things. Like new client, my message, the message of the client itself is S, which is a string made by temp message, substring from 0 to default bufferland, meaning if the message is bigger, this last byte on here wouldn't be 0, so when I make the string, it might try and read more stuff. So I just take the size of the buffer and add the substring to the message. And now, if iResult is smaller than the default bufferland, then the message that I'm trying to handle is the current client message. And then outputs this message and then path the HTTP using the string of the message and the new client message. And then new client message is, where is it? Oh yeah, send new client my message, sends that message that was parsed using the HTTP parse, because this is the message of the client, because it sets this message here. Then it parses this message, meaning that it reads what the message says and then make the response and fill the response in here, and then you send the socket using the client's socket, sending the message itself and the message size, and then 0. What is 0? Oh, flags. Yeah, no flags. You just send it, and then you output it in the sent message to the console and clear the message. Then keep is equal false, and close socket. I set keep to false, and then if keep is false, I close the socket. Oh, because it also stops the loop. And of course that if the, let's see, this is, oh, if there is a socket error, it also says that the client is connected probably, and just close the connection. Then thread detach and return 0. This is basic. This is the basic handling of any sort of server connection. Just get the message, understand what the client wants, and send the client what the client wants. And everything else is just closing connection if needed, when needed, and stuff like that. The parse HTTP is getting the message that it needs to decode as an iString stream, then string line, making a vector of lines, string line 1. So std get line str, which is the string stream here, get the first line. The first line is always the command. Get the command, and then lines push back line 1. Why? Because I might want to actually read all of the lines in some point. Then while there are still lines while the message still has some lines to give, lines push back line, like I just get a string, fill the string with the next line, and then push back the line into the lines array. If connection is keep alive, then return val is 1. If it doesn't say to keep if the connection is not keep alive, it's a connection end or something like this, or connection close. So it means that the connection will be terminated after this. What's it called? The connection will be terminated after the response has been completely filed. Then just taking line 1, which is a command, into a iString stream, and outputting two parameters, a string type and a string path. Path is very simple, it's just where you want your stuff to go, and type is just what type of command are you executing. There are 4 commands that every server should have, and there are many more that the server can have, but this doesn't really compute those very well because I have no idea what they do, and some servers handle certain commands differently. So the 2 basic commands that you can make your entire code work with is just get and post. Get is just get the file, post is when an HTML form was filled and the client wants to send this form. Of course there is a handling for the data here. The server does end up with a string of actual data, with a vector of the data that you sent. If I put a stop here on debug mode when my program running, and localhost yes, So first name is I'm dead, and last name is not really. So in data I can see there are 3 strings. F name is I'm dead, 1 I name not really, oh it's L name, and then third submit is submit, because it gets the value of every single one of the view sort page. The button itself is an input type submit, and the name is submit, so it takes the name of the input type of the input, and then it equals it to what is written inside the content. So the content, the default content of a submit button is submit. This is what those split functions do. They handle the data and they look for the separators and separate everything into the correct way. After it gets all the data, it just handles the post message same as it would a get message. Just message, path, and type. Because it has really no use for this. There might be a way to use like what's it called? To pass those parameters using something, and then to read them with what's it called? Always forget the name. You might be able to send them in the message that you return to the server, and somehow get something back with that you can read with JavaScript, but mostly those things don't really work for most of the servers that I've used. Unless those servers can handle stuff on the server side, can handle code on the server side, they won't really be able to execute post messages in the correct way. Because post messages mean that, say that something needs to be executed on the server side. If you use HTML forms and you want them to be executed on the server side, you use a post command. If you want something to be executed on the client side, you use the get command. Then there is the head command. The head command does the same thing that the get command does, except that it doesn't provide the body of the message. It just provides the header. When your browser wants to see if a file is available, it might use the head command instead of using the get command to save on space, like to save on bandwidth, because head command returns only the header, while get command returns the file in its entirety. And then there is options that just tell you what kind of options are allowed on the server. I can remove this, and it uses a HTTP 1.1, and the message type is 204 no content. Allows options, get, head, and post. Those are the four commands that the server can allow. And this is how the browser can know what type of commands the server can handle. Bad request, just 400 bad request, and returns the same type of 404 web page that I've used. Instead of having a 404 not found, it returns a 400 bad request. And can go over the stuff that goes on here. Gets split the path on where the question mark appears, and then you separate it into a path where the file, into subpath. First where the file is, and the second is where the parameters. And then for where the file appears, if the file location is empty, then you change it to index.htm because that's the default path, and then you direct it to the correct subdirectory, which is www, where I put all of my files. So the web server works in this folder, but every file read would be in this folder because I don't want people accessing stuff. I don't want my clients accessing those files in here. I just want them to access the files that are in here. There are 4 different content types that are handled here. There is also a default answer where if it's not one of those 4, then it just returns the file ending, meaning it wouldn't say image GIF. If GIF wasn't handled, it would just say GIF. JPEG or JPG would be JPEG or JPG, but because I do handle them, then it returns image JPEG even on JPG. And of course there is a check here that when the size of the file is not the same as the file message, because some weird stuff can happen, then it will output the file reading caused corruption in the string. This is a relic of when I accidentally used R instead of RB in the open file, because when you read a text file, it can end on an on an EOF message or on a 0, or like a null or EOF. Because if it's a text file and it gets to a 0, then it's an end of the file, even if the file itself continues. So every file is read as a binary file. So I can actually read images correctly, and it doesn't matter for text files because seriously there is no problem with text files reading them as binary, because it handles them the same way. Head is basically the same as that, but instead of adding instead of doing this, adding the file message into the message itself, it just stops. Bad requests return is just returning that error page, and options just return this. So everything is extremely simplistic. And then there is the clean URL plus is equal to spacebar to space in URL, and the percent sign mean that the two next bytes are going to be the values. This is just to be able to clean the URL with all of the n%20s instead of spaces and all of those other weird shit that happens. For each string of data I can do the clean URL. Of course there is a clean URL for char pointer and for std string. It's basically the same thing. Does absolutely the same thing. Just here it checks if it's smaller than the size, and here it checks to see a null. And that was the entirety of a web server. Web servers are kind of simple. I was Dimanari, and this was another software overview.